Welcome, podcast listeners and viewers, and thank you for joining us on the LightWave Digest podcast, episode 19. We are here to bring you all the news, reviews, interviews on everything LightWave and beyond. So without further ado, let's get this show on the road. Hello, Andrew and Tony.
Hello, hello.
Another month have passed. Time flies, right?
Time flies.
Yes, it does.
Been busy.
Yeah. So just short from both of you, what have you guys been up to this last month?
Yeah, we've been busy with a lot of installs, but the next project we're working on right now is an exterior renders using LightWave and Octane, so that's going to be fun.
Installs.
So
when you say installs, what do you mean by that?
Like the custom cabinets and custom geo walls, like that kind of stuff. Interior based stuff.
Oh yeah.
So a lot of fun.
So you actually
interior rendering is super heavy, isn't it? It's quite hard to do.
But you
actually with Octane, it's not so bad. It's pretty quick.
But you build physical cabinets and stuff like that, right? You
start
in 3D and then you take that through to a CNC machine and then you actually install these things.
Yep.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah. I'll send some screenshots of the last one I did, at least, because I do all the modeling in LightWave for those custom.
And Andrew, how have you been?
All sorts of things going on. I've had some health issues, but I'm not going to go into that.
You'll get better. You need some alcohol.
Death, basically, just slowly dying and getting old. No, I'm otherwise fine. Just really busy at work. Very boring spreadsheets, manipulating data.
Oh wow!
Make some polygons in those spreadsheets.
My company is having a 40-year anniversary, so we're getting a big sort of event organised for that. So there's, putting together banners, adverts, all sorts of stuff. So
just 40
more
years
work on top of the normal work. Yeah, it's been quite. I mean, I wasn't there the whole time.
no, but still, 40 years for a company, that is actually quite long.
Yeah. They're a quite a long-lived company. It's a cool company.
Yeah,
that's pretty neat.
But yes.
Cool.
So that's been making us very busy at the moment. But otherwise, I have I'm cool.
Yeah, cool.
Just tired.
Yeah.
And as I was saying to you guys just before we started recording, I'll get the plug-in, but it's a shame because people will see this and be like, "That sounds amazing. Can I go?" No, because it'll probably booked up already. This week is the multimedia expo, the Create Expo, should I say?
That's cool.
At Mansfield in the centre of Britain. And I've been there, I've been a guest there a couple of times. If you see me talking, that was probably that, if not just me sitting in my bedroom like normal. And also I go down there because they have some amazing, they get game devs, creative industries, all sorts of really cool talks and topics to do with the whole sphere of creative industry, and occasionally, because we're all nutters, a bunch of lightwavers, because it's the only excuse and the only event that basically is vaguely kind of vaguely lightwave, and we all love to hang out together. So it's really nice. I wish there was more lightwave events, that we could all.
That'd be great.
It's virtual, but I prefer it to be physical and to see people that I've only kind of met online, and so I have met a couple of people in real life, and it's pretty cool, including in Ben. I met Ben there a couple of times.
That's great.
Yeah.
How many years has it been going on? That's been going on for
it's quite a while now.
Time.
Although it has, but it sort of hasn't, because of the whole weird time anomaly with the COVID blip.
Oh yeah.
It feels a bit like the Avengers, doesn't it? There was that blip, and we all disappeared for 5 years, but we're somehow still here as well.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Outlived Modo, which is weird, but that's cool.
Yes. Oh my God, I know, isn't it?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, let's see. Yeah, so just to mention a little bit here for the listeners, is that we've had a very, very unlucky month. Actually, we had several people
interviews. That's right.
that we wanted to interview that had to cancel last minute. So there might be a hiccup in the release schedule for future episodes. We have people in the pipeline, so there are coming new episodes, but it looks like March might be an empty slot. So there's not going. I'm not going to say this like it's set in stone, but right now it looks like we are not going to be able to make a March episode.
Unless you guys who listen to this podcast, let us know if you use LightWave.
Yeah, exactly.
Or anything really.
I'm also hoping to, wink, talk to some of the people at the expo, and maybe I'll sit on a couple of them, and I'm quite heavy until they agree to be on the podcast. Maybe I'll just take a microphone and just hold it over them until
say some words.
Say some words. I did actually a few times think I'm not organised enough. If I could somehow pack a laptop and a suitcase and a microphone to actually do some live interviews out, but I'm very unorganised and I don't have any equipment. Do you have some I can borrow from a friend, but I haven't got time to organise that. Maybe I'll try next year try and do some interviews with people. That might be quite.
That'd be actually that'd be real neat.
Cool. Actually,
I've got a friend I might borrow some equipment from.
Yeah.
Don't promise anything, one but time. It sounds like I'm not going to promise idea. Nothing. But there's a few years ago, before COVID, we were trying to set up a podcast, and we went down to the UK Gaming Expo in where was it? Bradford, in the NEC at Bradford, and there was like thousands of gaming companies, and right next door they also had a sci-fi and comic book convention, and so we got a couple of people on. And we were doing interviews, and it was mad. It might be fun to do again.
Yeah,
maybe you had you've been filmed on the expo, right? So maybe we can just use that as the March reel as a backup. PBR rendering. It's brand new. Because
A, I have to look at myself talking, and and B, when you kind of look back and you go, wow, I got that wrong.
That's all right.
But because you kind of it's funny with 3D, you're always in growth. You have to be, and assumptions that you made because there was a lack of information. There was a lack of information, and it's an awful feeling to feel like you are the expert, and you're like, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. Where do I get the information from?
I love, actually, I don't know if you guys see on YouTube that they repost those old LightWave videos from, the Brad Peebler days where he's doing tutorials.
Wow. Oh, yeah, there's lots of those.
It's great. Digital imagery.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's fun to watch those because it's so old school, straight from the VHS tape.
And it was actually Amiga computers in those as well, some of them as well, right?
Was some of them? Wow.
Yeah,
wow. It looked like Windows to me. Looks like Windows, but
but I think if you go back, I have seen Brad Peebler actually sitting at an Amiga 4000 doing a video tutorial where they intercut between him, doing the, you see him properly, and then it cuts to the video screen, because it was easy to do that with the Amiga back then, because it was essentially video, right? But anyways, before we go into the news section, I also want to obviously mention that tonight's guest is Michael Frisk, who is an extremely talented all-rounder, I would say.
He's doing
generalist. Yeah, he's doing everything from adverts to visual effects, and he loves LightWave. So that's going to be a fantastic interview. So do not miss that one. I stress it.
That's right.
It's a very good interview, and I don't want to spoil spoilers. I don't want to spoil it, but it was different because a minor spoiler. He didn't have an Amiga. I'm like, what is this craziness? What are you talking about?
He didn't grow up with an Amiga.
He didn't grow up with an Amiga like all the other crazy weirdos that we are. So it was so nice to have a fresh perspective from somebody who's coming at it from a different place.
That's cool. What version did he start up with?
I can't remember.
He went to. Oh wait. Watch the interview.
I'll watch the interview. Yeah. That's
sorry,
not getting out of that.
Yeah, I'll watch it. I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah. No, but I think that's so cool that because not everybody did. people, but it's the fact that it's not just all old fossils, and that there are people in the, maybe I can get some students. That would be a terrible idea. Some students at the expo who will be like, what's a LightWave, to talk to us about,
I have a blender.
Their demo wheels.
Yeah.
But I think it is quite exciting, the idea of people who haven't just started from the Amiga.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That's super cool. But with that said, let's go over to the news. So, there haven't been a lot of things that has happened right now. It's been quite silent on the LightWave front. However, I just want to mention that they're
busy.
They do actually put out a lot of videos on their YouTube channel.
Yes, they do.
Yes, so just go there and check out. There's lots of videos on the Frigate and other things. So yeah, just go there and learn that stuff, because it's super powerful if you are into character animation.
There's some flow ones too, I think, that just got released.
Oh yeah
I believe.
I can't remember when we last recorded, but there has been one of the live sessions, hasn't there?
Yes, we did actually go
there through. Was
we did go through that in the last episode.
Last time, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, but so yes, it's a little while. But LightWave 2025 will be coming out, one hopes, soon.
Yeah,
once they found all the bugs.
That's good. Squish those bugs first. It's nice.
Yeah.
Squish. Absolutely necessary. And then a few squishes afterwards.
Yeah, other than that, the news that I saw, and I think it was on the LightWave chat and Discord, the Japanese SIGGRAPH Asia 2021 YouTube video. Which was like some Star Wars LightWave, like that Batman we were just discussing before.
Yes, the Star Wars.
Star Wars was in Tokyo.
Batman goes back to feudal Japan. Of course he does. I mean,
And now so does Star Wars. So it was a pretty good reel, though. It is
really cool. It is really cool, and I love seeing the other side. I wish, and again, maybe this is another reach out. Talk to us if you've got any of these Japanese studios that have incredibly talented artists, but we don't speak Japanese. Sorry, sorry, not sorry. It's hard. But if anybody speaks English, we'd love to hear from you and to have you come on and talk to us about all of the amazing techniques. Because it's just so, they even have like whole sets of plugins which people are going, what does any of this mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of looks cool, but I can't read Japanese, and you kind of can translate it a bit, but it's hard.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm super psyched that all these new tools
cell shading.
Cell shading, yes. Cell shading tools that are coming forward. That looks really interesting, especially because obviously LightWave wants to have its anime segment, and there are a lot of artists out there that do use LightWave.
A lot of studios too. Like I said,
that develops legs.
Star Wars one was pretty neat because they did everything in LightWave. So even the animation, the rigs look cool, and like even looks like they just animate the cloth through just bone chains and things like that, which is pretty neat. So it's kind of cool to see all that.
I imagine that they probably use similar techniques to a lot of the game engines, because it's sort of like, it's a lovely idea to have real-time physics, but it's probably just cheaper to do a couple of bone chains and some morphs, the same as everybody else.
Morphs and animate, sure. Yeah, but it's pretty fluent, pretty neat. I forgot even how they did the hair was kind of interesting for some of the samurai-looking guys. So it's a fun reel to watch. So anyone who hasn't seen that, it's kind of cool.
Did you guys ever use that Hairblade plugin? That was quite cool.
Hairblade? Nope. I don't remember that one.
Nope. I haven't heard about
it. Like inertia or something like that?
No, what it did, it was like a, how can I describe it? It was like, when you do an extrude using the magic bevel, and it kind of, you just draw it and it extrudes out. But you sort of drew 2D planes, which then had a 2D texture applied to it. So you could kind of draw in a sort of 3D-ish, 2D, 3D way. It uses these special custom polygons. It was like proper hacky, but like in a good way, because it actually looked really good. And it had some very powerful tools and stuff.
That's cool.
That just wasn't really doing
I know I used, what's the native hair plugin?
Fiber Effects.
Not Sasquatch. Fiber Effects had the modeler tool where you could, like when I did that pinata character, I used that to grow polygons, from every vertex or whatever to make that pinata look. Because you can make them thick as you want.
Yeah.
And not tapered. So it was helpful for that scenario. And then I just used, I think it was cloth effects to make them bounce.
Oh, yeah, just to have a little bit of movement.
Yeah, have a little sway and stuff like that.
Because if you make them kind of a sheet and they're all just sort of interacting with each other.
Yeah, they all just worked out pretty good for that use case. In fact, all their kind of old cloth effects and hard effects, all that stuff is always a good mix. I would say, though, I don't know about you guys, I always thought that was kind of overly complicated. There are all those little menus and panels to go through.
It's the sort of the balancing act of trying to make it as artist friendly as possible while simultaneously allowing the most control. And so it's like, well, that is 5,000 buttons, and everybody's like, how does this work?
Yeah, there's like 5 tabs in it, right? It's like, okay, this tab's this and this tab's that. So for such a little window. At least, because it was a small little boop, 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 particle effects, all those.
Yeah, remember, we were actually... it was one of those internal things that we can't show that we did within Ubisoft. And I remember Magnus Hageman, we were using LightWave at that time for rendering, and we got the hair strands from ZBrush.
Oh, yeah. I did that for the horse.
Yeah, and then we could actually use those and actually use cloth dynamics, which actually worked really well to sort of create the hair based on that. And also with cloth effects, it sort of swinged and, reacted to the body movement and stuff like that. Because it was one of the characters had sort of like a little bit longer hair in a ponytail. So that was perfect for that sort of stuff. So I think with all of this said, I think we have waffled on enough, right?
That's right. I like waffles.
Yes, it's super good with waffles. Oh, God, we could waffle on forever.
It's what people come here for.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Waffles. But yeah, guys, let's actually go on to the interview. And again, it's Michael Frisk, a super cool guy. So yeah, interview time.
Yay. Enjoy it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's guest. He grew up making stop-motion cartoons and clay animation using video equipment. Fast forward some years, he went to Daveschool in 2010, where they taught LightWave. He is now making a living doing freelance work using LightWave. Welcome, Michael Frisk.
Hi, nice to meet you guys. How you guys doing?
Hello.
Yeah, it's been good. Did you have a good Christmas and holiday?
Yeah, I did. It was the first Christmas and New Year's with a child. I have a baby girl. She's 6 months old now. So everything's been kind of flipped around in a good way,
Yeah. That's super cool, man. Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, congrats. That sounds delightful.
With LightWave, you have to also know about computers, and I'm very curious about how you grew up when it came to computers. What was the first computer that you encountered, and how did you transition into the 3D realm of things?
So the first computer that I remember was an old, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it ran Windows 3.1. And I remember everything was ran on DOS for the most part. It had a UI, playing like Ski Free and Wolfenstein and all that on it.
Yeah.
I remember often like breaking it or like ruining it or, installing things wrong, and my parents getting super frustrated with me. And then they ended up buying another computer. So then I got that one, so it was free reign. I could do whatever I wanted with it. And that was exciting. And this is, obviously all before the internet. And then we ended up getting a like gateway all-in-one computer. And I remember it had 10 gigabytes of storage. And that was, it was like, we're never going to fill that up.
Never.
And I did. I filled it up. And then
10 minutes later,
I'll tell you about that. And I would spend all day on that. I played a lot of video games like Ultima Online and stuff on it. And with Ultima, you know, it's difficult to learn how to install and get it online and whatnot. And that was kind of my foray into understanding how, I mean, as simple as it is, understanding how to work on a computer, essentially. You know, it's super basic, but you know, when you're 12, you know, it's
oh wow, you were that
quite
young.
a leap.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I built my own computer in, that would have been like 2001, maybe 2002. I was 13, 14 years old, and it had a NVIDIA GeForce or a G5200 in it. And that was, you know, that was the top of the line card then. And I think it had like 8 gigs of RAM. And that computer was, I thought it was awesome at the time. And that was when
memory in 2001.
I think it had 8 gigs. I think 4 or 8 gigs. I can't quite remember. It was so long ago. But I just remember thinking like, wow, that's a hefty computer. And that was when I realized like it's really not that hard. You know, like building a computer, that you just click it together. You know, I didn't understand what all the confusion was. You know, it's all pretty basic stuff.
Yeah. So when you say building your own computer, you actually bought the components yourself, right? So
Yep. We had a local, it was a cyber cafe, you know, where you would go and play games with other people. And the owner of the cafe actually helped guide me, like a Sherpa, on how to build the computer, and taught me a lot on how to do that. And he actually was kind of the first person to ever teach me how to 3D model, because I learned my first 3D modeling in Hammer Editor for Half-Life. So I would make Half-Life and Counter-Strike maps. You know, everything's called brushes and you know, sprites and everything, as opposed to textures and polygons and whatnot. So that was kind of my first, you know, introduction into 3D modeling.
So essentially, you sort of started seeing something when you were modding Half-Life. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was modeling levels, you know, maps.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And it's actually kind of funny. So I don't know if you're familiar, like CPL, which is the Cyber Athlete Professional League. They actually still use one of my maps that I made when I was 14 years old. Yeah.
That's so cool.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
It still has my stupid logo that I made on it and everything. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, I mean, right, I remember Half-Life 2 when that one came out.
Oh yeah, that was a big deal.
God, it was a game changer. For games, actually, a real game changer. Yeah, that's super cool.
Well, they ran the Half-Life engine for into the, you know, what, 15 years that engine lasted. I think they just updated it with, well, no, they went from Half-Life 2, that was Source, right? That was the Source engine.
Yeah, that was Source. Yeah.
And Source, I think they're still running a version of Source.
Oh,
yeah.
A lot of these big old engines, they're just the same engine with a new hack on top of it.
Exactly.
It's like the one they use in like for Oblivion and Skyrim. It's all the same engine with just bolt-ons and hack-ons.
Well,
and
it's kind of like LightWave
tricks. Yeah.
LightWave with plugins. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. God bless the plugins.
I never actually modeled in it, but I remember having when I had Oblivion and Skyrim, you could go into the TES editor and inspect all of the maps and the objects and everything. That was kind of a really cool feature, because that has huge loads of modding in that community as well.
Yeah. I mean, I remember someone that actually worked at Massive Entertainment as a game designer for many years. He left not that long ago. He actually learned a lot of the modding on using the engine that came with what was the game? I had it and it just disappeared. It's Neverwinter Nights.
Neverwinter. That's
Neverwinter Nights. Yeah.
That ran on the Oblivion engine, didn't it? The same.
Most likely. I don't know.
I think it
did.
To
be honest. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I was always more interested in the back end of the games. Like I would always it was actually kind of annoying for my friends. Like I turned on no clip and fly through the map and like look at the buildings off in the distance.
Yeah. Okay. That's
I didn't
cool.
actually enjoy. I don't think I've ever played an entire game in its entirety. Like I'd always end up just breaking it down and figuring out, like pulling the assets from the files and whatnot, and trying to see how the game worked.
Oh,
that was more interesting to me.
I was going to say it's one of the common trends that we have with people, especially because it must be the LightWave thing. It's people who enjoy pulling things apart and messing around with it, and everybody comes at it sideways, don't they? For 3D, I think it's a mindset of like, I love to see how things work, how to get into the nitty gritty of it, and you've got to almost have that to be a 3D artist, really, don't you?
Yeah, it's kind of a destructive curiosity, and I liken it to, I have a good buddy of mine, he's a carpenter, and it's crazy how much overlap there is in 3D and carpentry. Like he's working with his hands physically, but the thought process and the way that you construct and engineer the way you go about a project it's exactly the same. I learn a lot from just talking to him about carpentry, because he works with beveling and mitering and the way geometry works in the same way we do, albeit we're sitting on our chair drinking a Mountain Dew, and he's standing in a frigid garage, with coveralls on. But it's the same concepts, it's.
So this is before we are now at the stage where you started to sort of experience the 3D in games, right?
Yeah, and that would have been 2002, 1, 3, around there, early 2000s. And then I kind of graduated more towards, I've always been interested in video, right? As I'm sure, like most of us probably are. And then I went to making videos with, I think I started in like Vegas Video. I did like Windows Movie Maker first, which doesn't count. But then I went to Vegas Video, and that's when you could actually do some real stuff. And I just remember being really frustrated with what I couldn't do in Vegas Video. And there wasn't a whole lot of communities around geared towards video editing on the internet at the time, because the internet was pretty new. The only community
and video, you can't share video on the internet in the early internet.
No, it was because well, compression wasn't a thing either. You had MOV, but it was all garbage. But the only community that I could find that had any sort of interest in teaching how to do cool things in video was Star Wars. So I joined the Star Wars fan forums, and I learned how to do lightsabers in After Effects, which is just rotoscoping, layering, and adding glows and whatnot. And that was cool. I was like, I remember going to see movies and being like, oh, I know how to do all this. Like, you think you're hot shit when you learn one little thing, you think you know everything. When you're 15 years old, you think you know how to do everything. But in reality, all I knew how to do was rotoscoping in After Effects. But yeah, so I went from that to Star Wars, and then I had the trial version of Maya, which I still absolutely hate. But I learned how to do some real basic rendering with the watermark and everything on it, of like Star Wars ships and whatnot. And I just remember being really frustrated that I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And then eventually, through high school and whatnot, I was still fiddling around with video editing, and then I went to Daveschool and got some formal training on LightWave.
Wow. Oh. Yeah. So that's where you actually learned LightWave. That was in Daveschool, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I had only heard of LightWave. I had never seen it. I really didn't know what it was, like I didn't understand the concept of a 3D application, really, I was pretty naive. And then I didn't even know what they taught when I started my first day at Daveschool. I didn't know what software package we were going to learn or anything. Turns out it was LightWave. And I loved it. It was straightforward, and I just, picked it up. I love that the buttons are named, they're not just like logos or icons, I love that. I think we started in 9.6, I think is what we learned.
That was actually a really good time, actually, to
Yeah,
learn
like
LightWave.
the Light 9 series went on for a while. 9.6 was a good engine.
Yeah, I was taught modeling by Steve Warner. I don't know if you know who that is.
He's
actually
absolutely
actually have it right here.
I haven't chatted with him for a very, very long time, but I used to.
Yeah, he was the one that did this, which I think we probably all have.
Oh yeah.
Yep,
this is the Bible.
I have that book.
I have a PDF version of it, which I refer to more than the actual. You can see the spine is pristine. Yeah. Control F, and you just find what the hell you need. So Steve Warner, and I didn't know. He was allegedly kind of well known in the LightWave community. I had no idea. And he taught me 3D modeling, and then I learned. I went back to Daveschool later, and I'm kind of jumping around, but then I learned from William Vaughn. He was the 3D instructor then. Super cool guy. That dude, he really knew how to take a very niche knowledge and turn it into a very profitable career, which is something that I kind of picked up on a little bit. Because it's not so much how much you know, it's knowing how to use what you know to extrapolate
that's skill in itself, which not everybody has.
Yeah,
it's leveraging your abilities rather than getting over obsessed about things you don't know.
Yeah, like if you try to know everything, you're not going to know anything. You got to kind of pick your niche and just be the best at it that you can.
Wow! So now you have finished Daveschool. However, before we continue your career, sort of, do you have any other interests? Like music or fishing or things like that.
Yeah. I mean, I took piano lessons when I was younger, and I used to think I knew how to play piano. I don't. I can't sight read. But I enjoyed making music. I had Ableton way back in the day, and I would make, little music tracks, and what I got from that more wasn't what I created from it. It was more like the understanding the esoterics of it all, understanding quantization and arpeggiation. And it's crazy how those little things actually translate to animation.
Animation. Yeah, absolutely.
A sense of musical timing. I don't have any of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you learn, cutting one frame before as opposed to one frame after. It's just weird little things that you can't really teach. And I think I picked up more from that than I did actually learning how to play music. So yeah, I enjoyed making really terrible music. And then obviously computers. I have a lake house, so I enjoy water sports, skiing, tubing. Never really got into fishing. It's too boring for me. Just go buy fish, Well,
I love fishing.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, like it's just different people for different things, right? It's
cathartic. I understand that. It's relaxing. That's cool.
Yeah.
But I want to do something.
Yeah. Here's the thing. You are one of the first guests that actually say that they didn't use the Amiga computer.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Yeah.
The only guest who didn't start out with an Amiga, but it's a slightly different generation thing.
Yeah, I mean, I was born in '88, so it's kind of missed that boat.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of interesting, though. I just read about an Amiga that was actually driving something. I can't remember what it was. It was very recently. It was still at the head of something.
It was like a manufacturing plant. I remember hearing something about that. It was still running.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like a CNC or some sort of automated. I remember hearing about that. And it was like that light bulb in that fire station that's been running for 120 years. It's kind of that same thing.
Yeah, it's probably running NASA currently. It's like.
Well, I do know that NASA actually used them in the past.
They very much did. Just whether or not they're still using them now.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
I wouldn't imagine.
I didn't. I had an Atari. I don't remember what model, just for gaming. It was my dad's, but that's about the extent of that generation of computing that I have.
Yeah. So you and Daveschool, you learn LightWave. What did you do after that?
So a good amount of my classmates ended up going to work for Stereo D in Burbank. And I don't know if I applied at the time, but I think after I moved back home, I think I then reached out to a couple classmates, and I did actually have a interview to go work there. And it was, if you get the interview at Stereo D and people, it's like you're probably going to get the job. But then I looked into it more, and they're just doing rotoscoping. They're converting Titanic to 3D, and
wow.
And I ended up just ghosting that. I didn't do anything with it, and that was when I realized there's nobody in my city that does 3D. Like, there's nobody, and the people that do 3D here, they don't really, it's like they have Element 3D in After Effects, or they know how to download a model and texture it or something like that. So there's really nobody around here that does it. And if you wanted to, let's say you're a company and you wanted your product modeled in 3D and, a tutorial or an explanation of the product, that's going to cost you an arm and a leg, because everybody that does it is either, in the West Coast or the East Coast, and they have incredible overhead. So I was like, I'll do it for $200, and they're like, okay. So that was kind of where I got the bulk of my clientele, because one, they don't really, lots of these clients, they don't understand bad 3D from good 3D. Not that I was doing bad work, but that's your product. That's what it does. Good. They like it. So I charge them $200. They pay me $200. And now I still have, 90% of these clients, just because I have basically no overhead. I work out of my basement, and I'm the only one in the area that can do it. So it's kind of, I got them in my pocket here, and I realized, I think coming back home and not going to work at some studio, I think was kind of a wise move.
Yeah, I have actually heard some people that have talked about the fact.
I suppose the thing is that you've still had the gumption to get out there and make all these contacts. I mean, that's hard work,
Well, it's fun. Like I only reached out. I only cold called or reached out a couple times and got maybe one client from it. But every other client that I've ever got was all word of mouth, because the industries around here, there aren't too many competitive industries. We've got the RV industry, we've got the septic industry, we have manufacturing of aerospace, and they're all kind of compartmentalized in their own thing. So if they have somebody that can do what they need done, in 3D world, they'll be like, hey, this guy can do it, because they're not worried about any competition or anything. So word of mouth has pretty much built my entire clientele. It's who you know. And at the end of the day too, like I would rather employ somebody. I haven't hired too many people, contractually, but I would rather hire somebody who shows up, is friendly, is good to communicate with, and does a poor job, than somebody who does the best job ever but is a complete dickbag. I would rather hire the guy that is enthusiastic and friendly and shows up to the job, than somebody who is a savant, but they're arrogant. I would rather work with somebody that's fun to work with, So it's you got to find that middle ground there.
So now you are in a situation where you have started your own company. You have moved back. Did you actually move back to your home place?
I moved back to my bedroom. I moved back home.
You said you were working from your what do you say, below the house? What's it?
In my basement, yeah. So I set up my computer in the basement, and I remember my first job was to model. It was my first paid job was to model a heating system for a house, a gas.
Right,
heating
okay.
HVAC. And I just had to model it. And it's, it's just a box. It's just, I think it took me like a week, which is so funny. And I think I charged like $150. But I remember thinking, hey, it's pretty cool. And then my second job, which was the fun one, I had to animate a camel. It was for a car dealership. It was their hump day.
It's a little bit of a jump from box to camel.
Yeah, well, that's the fun thing about 3D is it's very rarely our project's the same. But I had to animate a camel for hump day. I don't know, it was like a hump day sale or something stupid like that. So I made the camel. I didn't use Turbo Squid. I didn't download anything. So I made this camel from scratch. I rigged it. And I think I rigged it. I don't think I even used IK. I think it was all FK, which was a pain in the butt. Mm-hmm. And it was all rendered on just, my computer had maybe like an i4 or something like that. I think it took me 3 weeks to render this thing, and it was only maybe 8 seconds of footage.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the clients loved it. And I look back at that and I'm so embarrassed. Like, I forgot to texture so many things in it. Like, the inside of his mouth is just black. Like, I didn't do any texturing in there. Yeah, it was horrible. And I think I even did fiber effects on it, but you can't even tell, because it was to do, long strands of fiber. It takes forever to render, and I think I kept shortening them to the point where I might as well just use a texture. But yeah. And it's funny because I think a couple of years later they came back and they're like, "Hey, we want to use this again and do some revisions." And I was like, "Okay." So I pulled up the file, and I basically had to tell them no, because I don't think I could even have used that file again. Like, I would have had to remake the whole thing. Because it was, I think that was done in 9.6, and at that time I think we were at 11.5 or something like that. And the file's gone. It's that's old news. You can't after a certain amount of time you really can't go back and open a file. So
yeah. And you don't want to go back to older versions after a while. It's for nostalgia. Yeah, you go, oh yeah, I used to like this. Oh no, it's really slow. I don't like it.
yeah. And then you look at how you named things, and you're like, what is this hierarchy? What is this? What is this file named? Like Booger Knoll? What does that even mean?
Yeah, that's so funny when you actually dig up old projects. But yeah, I mean. So now,
it's funny when the difference between working for a company or yourself, you don't have a structure in the same way when you work for yourself, or when you don't have to output it to a client. If you're doing a render, they don't need to see the file formats. But if you're giving models to clients, then you've got to be like, oh right, I need to know how do they name their files, how do they name the materials. You have to be proper. There is a difference.
It takes twice as long to do it. If it's just me, like I have my own little stupid internal language that I can, it's like chicken scratch. I can read my own chicken scratch, but other people can't. So, but I adopted a new file system method, which has really helped me. Instead of having a project directory per project, I've put them all in one massive project directory, which has changed the game for me. Like, because so often, like, you'll have, let's say you're doing camel animation, and then you're doing, piston animation, whatever. You'll have 2 different project directories for that, but you might reuse certain textures between the 2. So you're duplicating textures. And if you want to pull a texture that you've used before, then you got to copy it over, and it's a pain in the butt. So I've adopted, on my NAS, I have one massive project directory, images, objects, scenes, what have you. And then in the objects, then there's the client name. Or if the texture file is something that I know is ambiguous that will be used amongst many projects, then that's in camel or surfaces or, fur or something like that. So every asset that I use is tangible for every project that I do. And that has changed the game for me, because then I don't have to go back and source old work and whatnot. It's all just ready to go.
Yeah, and if they need it, you just package scene and then...
Exactly.
You're now essentially doing your own thing, right? And I'm very curious about what other software you picked up along the way. It could be other 3D software, compositing software. I mean, you mentioned After Effects earlier on, so tell us about
so
that.
I was trained at school. We learned Nuke and Fusion, which I really kind of wish I continued on, because if you learn something, if you don't flex that muscle, you kind of lose it. So After Effects it's easy, it's layer based. And so I use After Effects religiously. I'm trying to phase out of that just because of the way Adobe is going, but that's another story. So I use that. I use ZBrush often, a lot of times with scans like foods. So if I have to 3D scan a donut or something, ZBrush is, re-topologize and texture and whatnot. I use, so with CAD, lots of times clients will send me a CAD file of their product, and we all know CAD, how it is garbage when it comes to actually using it in 3D. So I have a couple of CAD programs, some paid, some free, that I'll use to export. Usually with CAD, I'll just export it at the highest possible mesh density that it can, so I don't have to do anything. It's like 500,000 polygons, but whatever. I use RealFlow quite often.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I mean, I like RealFlow. It's pretty straightforward, but it's super limited. You can't, you have to be very clever in the way you do your simulations. You have to really layer them out, and there's a lot of compositing involved, which I enjoy. I love compositing. My initial intent was VFX. Like I love doing visual effects and whatnot because it utilizes the most fun parts of 3D and the most fun parts of compositing. So I love doing VFX. So yeah, that I do. DaVinci, obviously. I think DaVinci Resolve is the best. I used Premiere for 15 years and just switched to DaVinci 2.5 years ago.
Oh.
And in a week, it felt like second nature. I've never looked back. DaVinci is great.
It's an odd fish. I when I first opened it, you just look at the interface and you're like, what's going on here? This is crazy. And I found After Effects, which is very deep when you start using it. It didn't take me that long to figure an awful lot of it out. DaVinci Resolve is like, oh my god, what's going on here? And then when it starts to click, and you're like, oh wow, actually that's really well laid out. But it takes a little longer for your brain to accept what's going on. This is weird, isn't it?
You got to get past the edit, cut, and color whatever menus on the bottom. Once you kind of understand how those work, then everything kind of just falls into place.
The other thing that I find very hard with DaVinci is I know it supports a lot of like Colorspace things. I just was like trying to get my head around how the Colorspace thing works in DaVinci.
No idea.
I've like tried a little bit, and you try to watch those YouTube tutorials, and you're just like, I'm not sure this guy knew what he was talking about either.
No, I don't think anybody does.
It's like that sort of software. It's got so much depth, you can see it's there, but just trying to figure out how it works.
The tutorials that you see, the guys that actually know about it, they just assume you do too. So they just glance over like these really like things that you need to know, and they're like, well, so then we're gonna set it to Rec 709 and then 10-bit. Okay, anyways, it's like, wait, hang on. What did you just say? I don't understand what the hell you're talking about.
And also, where did you set all of those things, and how does this work, and where?
Well, they're using a different version that you have, and it's in a different place. I get Colorspace, like I understand it, the concept of it, but I don't really understand it. I don't get it.
Getting the setup right is hard. When you
like
don't know
I get
what you're
8-bit, 16-bit, 32-bit. I get that. I get raw. I get linear, but that's it. I'm done after that. I don't understand anything else.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of industry formats which do my head in, like where because they've got these weird like 10-bit or 12-bit intermediary formats where they kind of mess around with the code so that you get as much information as possible, but it looks weird.
Yeah,
and it's
like
done for a reason. Yeah, all these like a Cineon was the old one, but then there's a more modern. There's a few different ones, and you just sort of, and it'll come in, and you go, Oh, what's gone on there? Oh, right, they've set it to this weird color space, and you've got to figure out what that is. And
Yeah,
I just did a VFX project for a client in LA, and it was like 12 different shots. I had to, do like muzzle flashes, bullet hits, blood splatter, standard VFX stuff.
cool.
And it took me, I don't know, 2 weeks, maybe a week and a half. It's a lot of hours. And then I send it off to him, I deliver it, and the color is wrong. Color space is all completely off. And I was like, oh, okay, no problem. I'll just go in and, change whatever. I couldn't do that because I exported it from DaVinci. I exported the clips, in and out, exactly when I needed to do the VFX project. And so those clips were wrong. So in order to redo the VFX in the correct color space, essentially I had to redo the entire VFX. So I had to redo the entire project in the correct color space.
Oh shit!
And that was a pain in the ass. That sucked.
Did that actually include the rendering from LightWave as well?
Well, this particular project didn't include. I think 2 of the shots had LightWave exports, LightWave renders. But I was actually able to reuse those anyways. But I mean that was the first time that happened because I've done VFX work for other people before, and what I'll do is I'll put like an adjustment layer with the LUT on it above the entire stack. So then I'll edit below that to make sure it all looks good, and then I turn off the LUT and then export it. So that way I'm sure that it's going to match the grade in the end.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was thinking that, LightWave doesn't, when you use EXR, right, it actually saves in linear space.
I actually don't. I use the PNG export more often than not.
Even with visual effects.
So I've used EXR for a few things, and usually I'll use it because I like chroma map. I like being able to have the layers available to me. Mm-hmm. But for the VFX, I'll usually with VFX I'll do it in a way that I do it in layers, and all the coloring and all that data is done in post. I had to do VFX of like fireworks, and I just rendered it out in layers, basically Luma mats essentially, and layered them up and did all the coloring in After Effects as opposed to the final coloring in 3D, which I thought was a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. It's just, I think normally I like using float simply for the depth information, so you can do proper blooms in a 3D LUT space. They all come out correct. That's more, but then everybody has different uses, and I think everybody for so long was using like 8-bit formats and so just had workarounds.
Yeah, I mean, 8-bit's fine depending on what you're doing, but I would rather have a bunch of layers that accumulate to 15 gigs of renders rather than half a terabyte of EXRs that if something's wrong, I have to go back and re-export the whole thing, re-render the whole thing, which you're going to have to do. If you don't have to re-render it 2 or 3 times, then are you even a 3D artist? If you're doing a home project, if you don't go to Home Depot 5 times, you're not even actually doing anything.
I mean, here's the thing. We actually, most of the passes we actually do in half a float, 16-bit EXR.
Yeah,
which actually
I do
saves
16-bit
a lot
PNG.
of. Yeah, and that is the way we work right now in our pipeline. And we also actually, because we are using Houdini and Redshift right now, and we can actually export that into ACS color space.
Yeah. I've seen it. I don't know what it is. Oh, ACES. Yeah, ACES. Yeah, that's the standard. That's what they use in Hollywood and whatnot.
Yeah,
but I do 16-bit export, but I interpret it as 32-bit.
Oh yeah, well it's the same. I mean, the extra height is only if you're doing ridiculous stuff. It's only really depth passes that makes any difference.
Yeah, so displacement maps and whatnot. That's
data passes. Data passes. If we, back in the days when we actually used LightWave in our render pipeline, everything was exported to 16-bit EXRs except for data passes, depth and other things we actually created.
I mean, I think to be honest, for most renders, you could probably get away with like 10 or 12 bit. It's just there isn't. Video's
hang
gone.
on, give me a second.
Yeah,
no worries.
but there's no such format.
Yeah.
Well, isn't EXR is just kind of a different variation of bitmap, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just stored in floating point, but it's just like most of the time you don't really need the full 16-bit half float. 32 is only really useful if you need it for like extreme height or in depth passes or something like that. But you probably could get away with like 12 or 10 or 12 bit for a lot of renders. That would increase the bit depth to more than enough. For most render pass technology, if you get what I mean. It's just that there isn't such a thing as 12-bit float.
Yeah, true.
So but I mean, it probably doesn't make the file size hugely smaller, so it probably isn't worth bothering to do it.
Oh, okay. So this is the project that I had to essentially redo, and the biggest one was you were talking about clean plates. My horrible, these flips aren't might not be able to do this here.
Well, if you can, you can. You can't, you can't. We'll see.
Well, I'm gonna try it anyways here. Let's see. So it's gonna work for me. Doesn't look like it wants to work. Well, this one works. This is the older version. So, oh shoot. This clip in particular, if you look, you can see the camera operator.
Yes.
And the reflection there.
Yeah.
His hand and everything.
Yeah.
So I had to paint him out like that.
Yeah.
And I had these clean plates that I made.
Yeah. So you've just isolated an area without the reflection, messed around with it,
and then used the clone stamp and whatnot in Photoshop. And that was the problem. So I saved out the scene in the still frame of the shot in the wrong color space.
So
no
when you would never get it to match properly if it's not all in the same. Yeah.
And if you got it to match on one frame, you're not going to get it to match on the other frame.
Yeah.
And so this was just a pain in the butt because you have to track something. You have to either manually track it or use Mocha or something like that. But there's nothing to grab onto because everything in this shot that you would grab onto isn't consistent through the whole frame. Okay, so this outlet is good and the door handle's good, but then she blocks it. And then, at one point, this door frame is good, but, so I ended up having to manually track it. I wish I could show you the newest version, but it's not working for some reason. But the other problem I had was in DaVinci, the project, the composition was in 1920, but the source footage was 4K, so it cropped it in. So half of these shots I did cropped in and sent it to him, and he's like, "These are cropped." I'm like, "Shit!" So I had to go back and redo it all uncropped. Yeah, that sucked. And you can't charge the client more for that because that's your fault. So
yeah, true.
But all in all, the shot, I think, in this example, this isn't the final one, but it's close enough. But turned out all right, except for this little hint here. You can see where it's a little different. I don't know if you can over the stream. Well, here's another example of wanting to just continue overworking on a project because you're doing it, you're putting your name on it, you want it to look good, right? So all I had to do was add, muzzle flashes on his gun here, but he's shooting at a target. So I was like, well, I want to see the target get hit.
have a hole.
I'm not getting paid to do that, but here I
Yeah.
have the final export here. Where is it? Here.
Oh yes, After Effects can be a bit of a pain when you're trying to
Yeah,
buffer
I'm
in
just gonna
footage.
pull up the actual export. It's right.
This is super cool though. It's like a After Effects tutorial for lightwavers.
Yeah, I think every 3D artist needs to know some sort of compositing.
Yeah, absolutely.
You do.
Yep.
You do, because if nothing else, it can save you so much time, because you just want to go, it's like, oh, I just need a little bit of dust on the bottom of this frame. And it's like,
you just keep going.
You could spend 4 hours editing some sort of physics simulation, or you could just get a little bit of a dusty animation and just
yeah.
just overlay it and comp and not bother with any 3D, because what's the point?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so like here I added it hitting the target.
Nice.
And that's just a mesh, I just added a little
just
mesh.
a mesh warp, but it's a subtle.
Yeah, and it looks convincing,
Yeah.
And less is more. You don't want to overdo it.
Yeah.
And you want to overdo it and then tone it back, to the point that it's unnoticeable, and then go up about 5%. That's kind of what you want to do. But
I like the little puffs behind it as well, of little particles.
Yeah, and that's from you guys know who Andrew Kramer is, Video Copilot.
Yes.
Yeah, that's just his stock stuff, which I use a lot.
Which is more than enough for what you need for this.
Yeah, exactly. It's just it's subtle.
And I noticed that it's in that funny. It's like it's that color space where it looks really kind of grey.
It's log. It's linear. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in
log looks really over the top, like grey, and then when you retone it to the final footage, it looks a lot darker. And
I thought you could in here. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but
it'll be like a display space thing. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure you can in here. Well, whatever. It's not.
I haven't been using After Effects for a while, but yes, it's a. Yeah, you have to edit and provide them in the log space, and then they tone it down.
Yeah, I'm not gonna waste.
Yeah, just don't.
But it looks so much. It looks so much better. But yeah, so that's just an example of. And I didn't have to add the smoke either to the gun there, but this is fun work, and then you get to see it, and then you get to watch the little movie, and you worked on it. There's this group of YouTubers that I always found very funny, and they had reached out on their Instagram. They're like, we're looking for somebody to do some Photoshop work or whatever. And I reached out to the post and I said, I won't do Photoshop, but I can do like VFX for you pro bono, for free, because it's fun. And I sent them my reel, and they're like, oh, that's cool. We actually have some stuff we can send your way that we need done. And one of them was, they filmed a winter scene in the winter, but there was no snow. So they needed snow added. And who was that lightwaver? They worked on that Western movie, and they added snow to it. I can't remember who that was.
I think that was David Ridland.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. David Ridley. He's one of the. Yeah, he's a very big pro.
Oh yeah, that guy.
We should get him on.
Yeah.
So this is the shot, and then the snow. And this actually wasn't the final one I did. That this smoke in the foreground is kind of dumb, but.
Oh, so this is your work, right?
Yeah, and it was inspired by how David Ridland's technique.
Oh yeah.
So you've just lightened it up a bit, and
yeah, you just take certain color channels, and the cool thing about it is the cars even look like they're covered in snow. Like it's kind of automated, It's you kind of can't tell,
It's handy that you've had all those autumn leaves, so you can probably just key in the orange and just make that white.
Exactly. It's basically chroma keying. Is basically what it is.
Yeah, I do a lot of that all day, but just not in video.
and then this is all LightWave hand match moving.
Oh, nice.
yeah, wow,
And then
cool.
that's Mocha power mesh on his face there.
So that you've got something for the fluid to kind of dribble down, sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's the only LightWave aspect of this is just the knife hitting the head. And I didn't need to go to the extent of I used Buju to track this.
Mm-hmm.
I have a copy of Buju. I actually don't tell anyone. Maybe edit that out.
You use that, yeah, bleep. Should we bleep that out?
Bleep.
Yeah, just take that part out. I don't think you
Okay,
can
cool.
buy anymore, can you?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, but that's super cool to see what you have been doing, especially with 2D, but also with 3D as well, using LightWave. And now I'm looking at the questionnaire here for the interview, and you have answered so many questions in the interview already.
It's why we sometimes lay it out formally, and then people go, "Well, you've actually talked about that already, so never mind."
Yeah. But here's the one thing: what makes you come back to LightWave as a solution to the problems you face in the production industry?
It's probably more like guarantee. It's kind of like a model out technique where you basically build each individual polygon as opposed to subdividing a mesh and beveling it and whatnot. Model out technique is your backup plan. Guaranteed you can model out anything in 3D. LightWave is kind of my model out for any sort of project that I have, because I know guaranteed I can do anything in LightWave, albeit it might take longer, it might be less efficient, but I know I can do it. So even if you're down to a time crunch, and I know that there's something that could be done way quicker, more efficiently in After Effects or whatever, it might take me longer to figure out how to do it and then do it efficiently than it would to just hand animate, do it manually in LightWave. So that's pretty much why I end up going back to LightWave every project, is because I know how to do it. It's manual, but it's guaranteed. LightWave is very robust and reliable in that regard.
There's,
not really,
I mean, I don't know your workflow, but one of the things that I think a lot of people do say is how, because LightWave was built from the ground up with the concept of it being a stage and a camera, and the gimbal and the way that you move around a camera scene in LightWave is very organic, and so you sort of you look through the lens almost like a game engine well before that concept even came into any other software. So you just you sit there and you just rotate with the mouse and just you're changing the aspect and you're doing that. That's really hard to do in a lot of 3D software, and it's super basic and the most entry-level thing that you can do in LightWave.
Yeah.
And that, I imagine, is super handy for when you're trying to go, right, I'll lift that up a bit, I'll move them to the left, right. That perspective seems to be mostly just done, and without having to do enormously complicated 3D tracking.
Exactly.
Which is what you otherwise have to do.
It's intuitive. I mean, it's intuitive if you know it. It takes a while to get there, but once you get there, it's super intuitive. Whereas Blender, even watch people that are seasoned in Blender, they've used Blender for 5, 6, 7 years. Even watching their workflow in Blender, it's unintuitive. Blender's super powerful. I'm not knocking on it at all, but
yeah.
That doesn't make any sense, whereas in LightWave, I can't think of a specific example, but it's just you just do it, because LightWave was built at a time where it was used for cinema, it was used for video, for movies. So it's based around a movie set. Everything is based on a tangible reality. And it just makes sense. It was built before there was the idea of 3D and computers. So it was based around reality. It was based around real life. And I like that.
I mean, it was originally built as basically a very fancy plugin for making 3D text for video. The video toaster, really, wasn't it? I mean,
the Kiki filter and all that stuff.
the basicest of versions of what LightWave was basically like, hey, we need to do a 3D animated text wipe.
I met Kiki, the Kiki filter or whatever.
Yeah.
Stockhammer, yeah.
I met her. I didn't know I was meeting her at the time. It was like that scene in Red October where Jake Gyllenhaal meets Warner Von Braun but doesn't even know who he's talking to at the time. Have you seen
it's
that
just
scene?
some person. Oh, hi, how you doing? Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then later on, you're like, wait a minute, who have I just met?
Of course, she's like 60-some years old. It wasn't.
But
wasn't like she was in.
But what did you talk about when you met her?
I don't remember. I think it was just it was at Daveschool. It was some meet and greet at some bar. And I was like, "Hey, how's it going?" Like, "Hey," it was literally nothing, but she was there.
Yeah, that's super cool.
And I remember I remember a few years ago I was at a film and Comic-Con in my local city, and in the first year they had some really amazing guests, and you probably guys, I don't know whether you guys know Star Trek.
Yep.
So there's a bit of a segue, but I was talking to this guy called Max Grudenchik. He played Rom on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And so went and got an autograph because, as you do. And he was like, and he sort of, and I was just like saying, like, we were saying how we were going to come and see him. They had like a Q&A later on. And he said, oh, ask an interesting question. And I was like, oh no, I've been challenged. I need to come up with a really good, interesting question. So I tried my best, and it was quite a good question. And I mentioned a few people, which this would apply to me, which was, so we're obviously sitting here in the audience and you're like stars, and we're all quite starstruck because you are like, you're really famous to us, and we're nobody, from your perspective, you don't, we're very, very lovely people. And it was, is there anybody that you've met that you were completely starstruck by because you were like, what?
That is a good question.
I mean, you probably,
Oh.
you know what I mean? Because sometimes, like you meet a celebrity, but to them, other people are also celebrities, and they'll be like, and, you think of a show like Star Trek, you'd have some amazing guests pop in. So that's a question. Just because you work in I know you probably don't meet a lot of the celebrities, but I'm just curious to know if you've met anybody that was left you really starstruck.
Well, maybe not in like a professional capacity.
Yeah.
Let me think. Well, I mean, I've met probably the biggest celebrity I've met, Giovanni Ribisi.
Yes, I know him.
Yeah, so he's like one of the main owners of Stereo D.
Oh wow, I didn't know.
Yes,
that.
Yeah, he spoke at our graduation at Daveschool, if you want to call it a graduation. It's a 1-year course, but he spoke at our graduation, and I got to hang out and chat with him for, I don't know, 30, 45 minutes. He's not very talkative.
That's amazing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But he's super, cordial,
Yeah.
but he didn't have a whole lot to say, but he's probably the biggest celebrity
he's there on a function, isn't he? He's like,
What's that?
There on a function.
Yeah, he was there. He spoke.
He doesn't know who you are or what's going on.
No. I mean, he had an idea. Well, he spoke at our graduation because our Block 4 instructor had a connection with Stereo D, and essentially they were using Daveschool kind of as a resource for employees, at the time.
Yeah.
So they're kind of recruiting
people. It's great for a lot of artists, isn't it? You're getting that reciprocality.
Exactly. Yeah. So he knew,
fantastic.
He didn't know who I was, but he knew what I was about, right? So, yeah, that was kind of cool. He's
That's
kind of
amazing.
A little introverted like I am, so that was, kind of.
Oh yeah, because he's not on his A game. He's not on performance. He's just like some dude who's hanging around with a bunch of students.
Yeah. He's very fidgety, which I kind of like seeing some real like human attributes. Like seeing like, oh, this is just a guy. This is a person. And that was really cool. So I got to meet him for a while, and then I met Jeff Goldblum once on a flight. That was kind of cool.
Oh.
And everyone's,
amazing.
crowding around him, and I didn't do that. I think that's kind of,
No, I wouldn't. I have seen famous people, and you're just like, well, just people, just leave them
Yeah,
alone.
they're-
They're just getting on with the
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
tip your hat to them,
It's
say
not
hi.
fair. They need to go.
Yeah.
They need to go to work. They need to, just get a plane to see their family, and you're like, you've got a bunch of people hanging around them and being annoying. So
Yeah, I feel like being a celebrity is kind of a curse,
yeah.
But are you guys familiar with the band Beach House?
Nope.
No.
Well, they're relatively big. It's kind of a indie experimental band, Beach House. You've probably heard their songs if you looked it up. But
Probably.
I was in Washington D.C. and I got a notification on my phone that Beach House was playing, and they're like a mile from where I was. So I walked to the venue. I bought a ticket from the box office. The show didn't start for an hour and a half, and the venue was connected to a bar. So I went next door and I sat at the bar, and I'm, buying some drinks, and there's these people there, and I'm hanging out with them. The bar's completely empty. I don't even know if the bar was open, but they were serving me. So I'm hanging out with these people, talking to them, shooting the shit, and it was a good time. And then they're like, okay, we got to go. I'm like, okay, bye. And then they leave. And then I go to the venue when the show starts, and Beach House comes on. And I had never seen, I don't know what Beach House looks like. I've only heard their music. And I realized that was Beach House.
Yeah.
I'm hanging out with them, just chatting and whatnot, and just talking about random, goings on.
Some guys at the bar, and you're just having a nice chat with them and being polite, and you're like, oh my god.
That was and I think they probably, they're one of those bands that they're not very face forward, right? So they, you wouldn't recognize them if you saw them anyways, but I think they still maybe appreciated that there's this guy that doesn't know who they are talking to him, because I could assume that gets a little old.
Yeah. I mean, they've probably done that on purpose. I mean, in a way.
Oh yeah,
Maybe.
yeah. They're not going to tell me, hey, we're Beach House, but
yeah.
But yeah, that was
who.
But I kind of wish I knew at the time, because I maybe would have. Actually, you know what? No, I'm glad I didn't know, because I probably would have put on airs. I probably would have changed who I was. I probably,
And you got a real, genuine, human, normal interaction, and to see them who they are, rather than like them being on guard and you being on guard. So
absolutely,
that's a lovely thing.
Yeah, it's like when we do commercial shoots and whatnot, we'll tell the talent on screen, we'll tell them, hey, we're not rolling on this take. Let's just run through it. Just give me a dry run. Just read your lines, and we'll just kind of pace it out. But I am recording, and 9 times out of 10, that's the take we use, because they're not on guard. They don't have their barriers up. They feel very natural and comfortable with reading their lines. So it's kind of if you assume and that everyone's watching you, and you think that you're being critiqued, on the nth degree, you're not going to perform as well as you will if you think that it's private and that's casual. It's like singing in the shower. You're probably a hell of a lot better singing in the shower than you are karaoke.
Yeah, no, probably not neither.
Well, yeah, I mean.
Are you using GPU or CPU for rendering?
GPU.
Octane,
religiously.
I guess.
Yeah, Octane, of course.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I switched from CPU to GPU 8 years ago, maybe. I don't know. But, at the time I had one GTX 960. I don't even think it's supported anymore. And then I bought another, and then I bought another, and then I couldn't fit anymore. And then, the nice thing is that you can keep adding GPUs. Whereas I get, LightWave, what's LightWave render, what's that called? The render farm, the render nodes.
What's it? Screaminette?
Yeah. That's great and all, but you have to have, it has to be like a separate computer each time.
Yeah.
So with the GPUs, you can just add GPUs. And the nice thing with Octane is I can just pop open a node on this laptop, which has a 1060 in it, and now I have a whole other node on it. and that was a game changer. You know, I can render out a scene in 1/50th the time that it would have taken me on my CPU. And I've got a farm right behind this wall here with 6 GPUs in it. There are 4 1080 Ti Founder editions, which at the time were way too much money. But you know, it's GPU all the way, 100%. And I like that you can interact live with your scene while you're doing it. And I know that VPR and all that can do that, but I don't like how it's not developed for LightWave anymore, of course. But yeah, GPU. It's all GPU.
Yep. That's super cool. And yeah, I mean, there's a reason why we moved away from LightWave to Redshift, because, you know, we actually wanted to use Octane, because Octane was actually at that time when we sort of investigated this, Octane was on every software. And the thing, our goal was that to allow everyone to use whatever and then output into Octane. But then
that's a consistent format between everything type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. However, Octane at that time, compared to Redshift at that time, was actually a lot more expensive for us, because we needed a lot of, I mean, I'm talking about 20 licenses or something like that, right? And
well, why couldn't you have just done nodes?
Come again?
Why couldn't you have just done render nodes?
Well, because, that's actually a good question. Why didn't we do that?
You could have surfaced and textured in not discovery mode, whatever it is with Octane, where it shows the watermark, but you could have then rendered nodally to multiple GPUs on one license, you know.
No, I don't think that it worked like that.
Maybe
back
it didn't,
then, because we need to actually have a working solution where we can submit a scene file from any software to the render farm that then use Octane on the render farm.
Yeah,
so you can't do render farms with Octane.
You can, but the host is dependent. The host has to be there, so you're not sending it off to the farm.
Yeah,
but it basically emulates the GPUs as if they're local. And if you have more than one GPU in your local machine, you can toggle one GPU on, one GPU off, which makes sense. But and there was a trick where if you have, let's say 2 GPUs locally, and then you get 10 on the farm, you could turn off both of your local GPUs, and it would essentially only render on the farm with no local activity at all. I recently upgraded to a 3090, and I just have one GPU, and I can't toggle it off, which sucks. So every time I render on the farm, my local machine has to be rendering as well. I wish there was a way I could disable that GPU and just use the farm, and I can't find a solution to that, which is
okay.
It's part of the way. I mean, maybe they've kind of disallowed it now. It's part of the way that Octane they want you to rent their render space, even though they allow you to do it on local machines. It's sort of baked into the whole concept of the software, unfortunately. So I do think it's always going to be a bit of a fight.
Yeah, well, and also just to explain, since we are actually working within our own cloud, which is Ubisoft. And we have a lot of secrets. We can't just outsource things to render farms or anything like that, right? So that's another thing. But yeah, there might have been a workaround that we didn't know about.
But I'm talking the local nodes. Like I can pop up just a render daemon on any machine in my house, and it'll find it.
We can't work like that, because we need to, we are a team.
Compartmentalize permissions and who can view what and things like that.
Oh, I get it, yeah. Yeah,
So
and
you
that
might
would
have
be a
like
pain.
Team A has got an NDA, and so they can't show it Team B, but you're all on the same cloud, so you'd have to be very careful about who's using what. And
Yeah.
Yeah, so you'd have to
very
set up
different
like
scenario.
virtual machines or something. That would be a pain in the ass. Yeah.
Octane's more like a reality simulator, whereas Redshift's more like a classic renderer, and they
Yeah.
want to have that fine control that you get from an artistic perspective. Whereas, of course, sometimes they're like a nice reality simulator. It's like, oh, I thought your camera had crashed there.
Yeah, it
your
did.
reality simulator isn't practical because sometimes you want to be like, oh no, I want to just render this in lots of different layers, and we'll tweak it in post, for example, and that's perfectly fine, and probably the most likely solution because of the size of the renders that you guys are going to be doing.
And also, what the words I was looking for was biased versus unbiased render engines.
Yeah,
and
I feel like Octane is almost more of a, and I mean this lightly, more of a toy than it is like an industry tool, and I use it religiously, so I don't mean it in that way, but I feel like Octane's a little bit stripped down. It's a little simplistic.
It's sort of, it was grown out of a toy, and literally the company is a toy, and it's a very joyful product. But I think there's that sort of like the stability and the predictability and stuff. I think is what people sometimes have to have for like if they're working in a large workflow. A thing that's fine for somebody who's a one artist or a small team is different from what you need to have for a large team in a pipeline.
Definitely.
And I think Redshift was designed from the ground up to be like a industry sort of style renderer, albeit powered by the GPU. And it's super, super fast. Like it even has interpolated radiosity, or at least it did. I don't know. I've not been keeping track. Which obviously Octane doesn't even understand at all. Everything's just brute force.
Yeah, and you know, and I've worked with other artists with Octane, and it's a pain. It's a pain in the butt. Whereas the native LightWave render, if you're working remotely with another artist, it's a little bit more user friendly across multiple users. Whereas for some reason, Octane just doesn't translate well between different machines, and I can't explain why, but it just doesn't. You know.
Yeah.
The renders look different, and there's no reason why they shouldn't. You know.
It always seems like, but then again, it might be a version thing, it might be a driver thing.
There's something there.
Not too bad, but it has had that issue in the past, like if the Intel AMD bug.
Oh yeah, I know what that's
been an issue in the past. But I think it's the sort of the deterministic thing where you want that predictability, where it's going to look the same across everything. And I've heard very, very good things about Redshift. I just don't have a machine that could run it. Or I would think it'd be great if we could get a Redshift for LightWave at some point. But
who developed Redshift?
Try that.
The funny thing is that the artists that tested, we tested Octane and Redshift together, right? Yeah. And the artists actually wanted to use Redshift because it reminds you of. Here's the thing: Redshift actually works very, very similar to most other render engines when it comes to sampling and all of that stuff. And people were just so much more used to that, so they wanted to do that, and that's why we chose Redshift.
Yeah, and that makes sense. That in a kind of an industry world where if you've got things like and apparently, don't want to knock anything just because it's what I've heard. I read a lot. I haven't used it. It's very, very simple, user friendly, and artistically driven, isn't it? So they're taking I'm taking my workflow that I've used from Arnold, or I'm taking it from LightWave or Mantra, and just applying the exact same logic to to this software, and it works exactly the same. And you're like, oh well, that's very easy. I don't need to learn anything apart from you toggle the setting X instead of setting Y in the other software type of thing, and everything's more or less the same. And it's like, oh yeah, that works predictably, and that's what they need for production pipeline. And but
with Octane, it's very tricky. Like you have to do a lot of workarounds with stuff because it only sees 3 UV maps, for example, on any given scene. Like the scene as an entirety, it only sees 3 UV maps. And when it comes to texturing and surfacing, you have to do a lot of tricks to it to get it to behave in the way that you would expect native LightWave to behave. And that can be a pain in the butt. Like with the Octane displacement is super powerful because it doesn't utilize geometry. It utilizes color space or whatever. But you can't manipulate the image with texture displacement, whereas, you can't change the gamma or I think you can change the scale, but you can't change the image as a whole while doing the UV displacement. So you have to do image sequences and the like. And when it comes down to like those shortfalls of Octane, I find myself often using native LightWave just to get it done, just to get it output.
Because something that would be very basic in most renderers is actually onerous. And it's just like, I'll just do it the old school way. And yes, it'll take a bit longer to render, but it's taken me so long and so many workarounds, and it's crashing, and that doesn't work because you can only have this number of UV maps and stuff. Yeah, and it doesn't see. I don't think it sees world coordinates. So you can't texture something based off world coordinates. You can't use a null to drive texture space in a world environment. As far as I know, there might be a way to do it. Could you not use one of the bakers? So, like, say you took the object, applied a UV map to that, which is one of the 3 that you're allowed. Bake the texture of whatever it is that you're doing in LightWave to the baker per frame. Sure, yeah, but then you're going back to baking. Right. There might be a way. But let's say you have water. You have a ship moving along the water, and you want the water displacement to move along with the ship, and so therefore the texture needs to move in world coordinates. You don't really technically need world coordinates for that. You just need to move it down the V axis or whatever. But in that example, you can't use world coordinates. As far as I found, I could be mistaken, I could be wrong. But there are little tiny little nuggets of things that you run into that it completely throws your entire workflow out of whack with Octane, and it can be very frustrating. But those small shortfalls, I don't think warrant not using it. I think no, of course not. And let's be honest, over the years, LightWave was exactly that. It's like we can't do that. However, with these 5 workarounds. Well, I think LightWave taught me troubleshooting. Troubleshooting and workarounds. Well, this doesn't work. Well, how about if I try it this way? Eventually, you just start throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks, and it's definitely it's a totally different mental space working with 3D as a whole. You see vector artists, painters, people that work in ceramics. They all kind of have the same, mindset of things. But the 3D artistry, I think, is a totally different mindset. I think it's very esoteric, and it's interesting to me. The way 3D artists tend to think. Yeah. It creates a very visual language, and it's a thing that you can only explain to somebody else who's also a 3D artist, because nobody outside of that field will have a clue what you're talking about. Yeah, it's kind of lonely. Like you sit down at family dinner and, your dad's asking, so what do you work on today? I'm like, I'm not even going to try. I can't explain it to you. It's really fiddly and complicated. And it's not that it's like so advanced. Any of the jargon. It's not that I'm better than you or anything. It's just like I physically don't know the words to explain it to you.
What do you think will help the community to be and stay positive, constructive, engaging, and energetic?
Well, I think that the LightWave community is, for the most part, pretty positive and engaging. But I think that there is it's a small community, and it's a very opinionated community. So there's a lot of infighting, which is fine and all that. But I think, to answer your question with kind of not maybe the answer you're looking for, I think the community needs to grow. I think we're kind of living in a bottle, I think we're kind of living in an echo chamber. And I think we need more people with different opinions, different workflows, different processes to join the LightWave community to kind of foster more of a, I don't want to use the word diverse, but more of a diverse point of view, right? And I think to do that, we need to make LightWave more accessible. It needs to be, I think a lot of people think that the reason LightWave is stagnating is because of its legacy workflow. And I don't think that's true. I think the reason is because it's kind of expensive. It's kind of, there isn't really a way for people to just jump into LightWave and use it. I think that if there was maybe a dumbed down free version or, I don't know, open source, that's kind of a big word to use, but I think that if LightWave was more accessible, people would realize its value and it would grow the community, and through that growth would generate a driving passion, and the community would kind of seek a little bit new life,
Oh yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah.
But yeah, I think right now, I think the community is pretty generally positive, aside from the fact that I think there's a lot of people that are very seasoned and have been around for a while. So, and myself included, you know what you know. You're right. We all kind of have a little bit of an ego, and that's fine. But I think that through that, it kind of it doesn't really drive like any connection, right? Because everyone kind of stays in their own lane. So I think if we made more lanes and we brought more people into the community, I think that would kind of help.
Yep.
Yeah, I think as well, to be fair, one of the reasons why a lot of arguments happen about like workflows and stuff is that not everybody's an educator. And what I mean by that is like not everybody can be William Vaughan. Like me trying to explain to you about what normal maps before earlier, and it's the intrinsically a lot of it's very complicated, and LightWave is a very artistic friendly tool, so you can play with the thing before you even understand what it means. And so you kind of like, when you kind of retrospectively figure it out, you go, that's what that's doing. But it's very easy to just twiddle with a slider and faff around and it works. But you don't, and so the inability to be able to fully explain things does limit people, I guess. It's just because
and I think that's kind of true with a lot of 3D packages, because there isn't instant gratification. With most 3D applications, lots of people, they want to sit down, they want to do a 30-minute tutorial, and they want to put something out that's really cool looking, and if you want to do that, you can go watch a Video Copilot or a Film Riot tutorial in After Effects, and that's cool. 30 minutes, you can make something that looks really fun. But in a 3D, you're not going to do that. It really.
There's a lot of people have asked me in the past, can I do a modeling tutorial? And I'm like, it's like, do these 25 operations 5 trillion times and you'll have a fantastic spaceship.
And
there's a sort of a...
And half the time you're just telling them keystrokes, and who remembers that, because it's incredibly esoteric. And in order to get people to dive deep into it, I think you have to make it just incredibly accessible. Like look at Blender. Blender is the most convoluted, confusing piece of software, in my opinion, but it has a huge community because it's free. And I'm not saying make LightWave free, that would be silly, but I think that if there was some sort of middle ground, I think that would be incredibly beneficial.
It would be good. They do release student licenses, so I guess if there's anybody that's at university or college, I think your university or college can apply to get licenses so that the students can play with it for free, I believe. So that's certainly something that people might want to explore. Maybe if you work as, if you're a part-time student or something, you might be able to get a hold of a license so you can try it out, which would be fantastic for people.
It's $50.
I think the only problem with like a clipped down version is what do you take out, what limitation do you put in, and also that's something else that the dev team have to keep up to date.
Who would you want to see on this podcast?
I'm assuming a LightWave artist.
We don't want to limit ourselves, but at the same time, it's like
I really like to see Brian Phillips back. Bri-Fi. I've worked with him several times in the past. The dude is incredibly talented. Probably one of the most interesting, unique people I've ever interacted with. Great work ethic, very good to work with, and I just think his work is unlike any other. I think I'd really like to see him on this podcast because he's got some out there ideas, and he kind of goes against the grain a little bit, which I kind of like too.
Thank you so much, Michael, for being on this show. This has been an amazing journey of knowing you as a person and knowing you as an artist. I thank you so much for being on this show.
Well, thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun. I'll come back sometime.
Yeah.
It'd be a pleasure to have you back again. And actually, this is one of the things that's really cool about these podcasts. It's like yourself. I don't know anybody who lives anywhere near me, and so it's really cool to be able to reach out and chat and speak special nerd talk that only us special nerds can understand. In that kind of, it's like a magical experience. You're like, oh, I'm going to hang out with my weirdo friends who nobody else can understand apart from me. And it's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Because nobody else can get excited about it in the same way because they don't understand what you're talking about. And it's lovely to be able to hang out with people who speak the same language.
Yeah,
the language of LightWave.
Yes, yeah. We're so far, but so close at the same time.
Thank you all for watching and listening to this month's episode. Be sure to tune in next time so that you don't miss out on all the goodies we've got for you. In the meantime, if you have any news stories you'd like us to know about, you can reach us in the comment section or send an email to lightwavedigest@gmail.com. with the word news in the subject line. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment. Your engagement is really important to us, so thanks in advance for your support. So until next month, always light the wave.